Mr. Ismail Gafoor, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure indeed, yes.
So PropNex is the largest listed real estate agency in Singapore. And you came to Vietnam last year, 2018. You plan to make an impact for the market here. So how did you plan to do that?
I think to start with, one of the key things here is this. I realize Vietnam gives a little bit more challenging than Singapore.
Why?
To start with, the number of people, the population, the magnitude is very different from Singapore. Singapore, a lot of things are very much in control environment. But once we have the recipe done, we have a strong desire to make it happen in a country that has got huge potential. And we think, as far as Vietnam is concerned, the real estate market and the young generation's desire to own a property and to invest is huge. And that's where bringing the element of trust is important to the consumers. But before we can bring the trust, we need to train the salespeople so that they become professional. So part of this dual career path requires a salesperson, when they join PropNex, is to embrace this knowledge basis concept of leveling up from a salesperson to a manager and a leader. And that takes a fair amount of time in grooming these people. Therefore, one needs to have the right mindset and the attitude.
Yeah, I believe so.
And they will have to think of long term and not short term. And when we can fix these things right, it's easy to manage even 8,500 people. I mean, put it this way. I, as a CEO, cannot take full credit for my company. There's no way one man can look after 8,500 people's performance. But I've got in Singapore 200 leaders and about 400 managers to look after this group of people. And from the company's profit, the managers and leaders are taken care of. And now in Vietnam, we started 1 year ago. We have about 175 agents in Vietnam, and out of which about 8 leaders. And I'm happy to say, though it's a slow start, but we want to have the foundation right. We think in time to come, we want to bring in the same level of professionalism and training in Vietnam. It's not going to be easy. It takes time, but I think we have to start somewhere. That was exactly the case 20 years ago in Singapore. The practice was again the same thing as people don't follow rules because people want to do what they are comfortable and what is a norm. But what we need here is this. We need to have a few group of people who believe this is a career they can build over time. And once this happens, as long as we continuously emphasize on these things and incorporating technology, and technology does play a huge part. One of the greatest advantage we have of economies of scale, the fact that we are already, as a public listed company in Singapore, we have a fair amount of deep pockets. And because of that, we are able to do research and as well as spend money on platforms, apps, virtual office, technology, training, and so on. And whatever we spend, when we go to Vietnam and elsewhere, the benefit of the countries that we go, they can use our software using on a cloud base in terms of invoicing, monitoring, and all other processes. And that's the greatest benefit people in Vietnam or the company or the agents are able to immediately take advantage.
Technology developments really impact the role of an agent as well. You have the apps which just connect people faster and more convenient. So how do you see that would change how agent could improve themselves? And in this, 21st century, if somebody want to be an agent in the real estate market, what should they prepare themselves?
I think you really asked a very important question as far as the real estate agents are concerned, because I think one of the big concerns for many of the older salespeople, do they even have a future? Because
that's a big question.
Because I think real estate agents who are just purely playing the middleman role, their days are numbered. Because if you are just a connector of property and a project, I think technology can very easily replace you.
You have the sharing economy when you have the apps connect people
Yeah.
very fast. There's no need for the middleman anymore.
Yeah. But what is important here is this. We also understand property investment are not a investment that you buy today and tomorrow you said, I don't want you to change. You can't. Because most of the property investment takes a fair amount of life savings and a commitment of the person within a bank loan that stretches 10, 15, 20 years. Therefore, you cannot make a mistake. And that's where an agent has got an important role, beyond being a middleman. His knowledge and understanding of the real estate market, his ability to connect with the customer to understand the customer's needs, that he can buy the right property on a long term, not speculative. And ensuring that those people who buy the property from an investment, whether the salesperson can come and continue to do the rental and taking care of the property in terms of all other things, therefore this investment can last a longer period of time. So an agent, first and foremost, have to have a good knowledge of the research data so that he can communicate and empower the consumer to make that right decision. So agents are no more middlemen.
Okay.
He is a consultant. And I'm thinking a salesperson is no more a general practitioner doctor. He's like a heart surgeon. Because if you don't do it right, the buyer is going to get a heart attack because he has committed something huge and he may be bankrupt.
So what seems to be your biggest challenge in terms of the regulations of the real estate market here in Vietnam?
I think one of the key things that my people are ready to go out there and do the business. But at the moment I understand something on the legality of the land titles and things like that. The authorities are a little bit more cautious in approving the launches, and that has slowed down the market in terms of the supply. But the demand is strong. But for salespeople, their livelihood depends on supply. Yeah, you can have a lot of people are interested, but if you don't have a product to sell, and again, when there is no certainty in terms of a process, there are many Singapore big developers, CapitaLand, Keppel, and many others come to Singapore, and from Singapore, they come to Vietnam simply because they see Vietnam as a very strong potential growth. But when there are uncertainty in terms of time frame of approving when the project can be launched, this creates a little bit of a challenge for foreign companies to come and invest and to grow or to bring up the businesses. This seems to be some of the challenge, but I'm very confident these are not going to be a long-term problem. And I understand in the legislations and such things are being discussed. Hopefully next year, 2020, things will be much more clearer and more projects will be up in the pipeline. And we are just ready to help more customers to invest right, owning the right property.
Yeah, sure. From the perspective of the real estate developer, how do they view the role of agents right now? And how do you plan to build a great relationship with the market leader now, the real estate developers right now? It's a very important point. One thing that we have to realize, market don't remain the same, upbeat all the time. True. Today, the market is very hot, so the developer don't have that much of a pressure. So he called the shot. But in Singapore right now, the market is completely opposite. The market is a bit lukewarm because the government have introduced cooling measures to slow down the market. And therefore, the developers are so stressed about selling the product. Therefore, the developers give huge amount of respect and work with us in terms of partnership, how to bring and sell this particular product to the consumers. That's why we do a lot of consumer seminars and all other activities. So coming to Vietnam, at this juncture, we will follow the tide. We support the developer. Our value is only recognized as long as my team get a project and sell good number of units to have the traction to say your system work. And I have to eat the humble pie to show and prove
that we are good enough. But there will be times where the developer will see us that we are truly a partner to help them because their risk is also huge. So on that basis, I think in a real estate business, there are few stakeholders: developer, agents and agencies, the broker, and consumers. What is important here is this: there must be mutual respect and support. Developer want to sell at the right price. Agents are trained effectively to understand the product, and consumers are brought here to explain and tell them about the benefits. And only when these three people do it right, then the business is done well. And that's what we are for.
How do you foresee the markets in 2020 in terms of supply and demand?
I think Vietnam bucks the trend of the world. Despite the global challenges of the United States, of the China, and many other concerns of the economic slowdown, countries like Singapore, in fact, faces greater challenge because of a lower GDP and growth. But we are talking about Vietnam, 6 and 7%. And yet there is a strong young population still wanting to come and settle in the urban towns and the cities. And therefore the demand is strong. I think Vietnam still have got a few more good years in the running of a positive growth story. What is important though, I always will be very concerned here is this: whatever the growth in any country, it has to be sustainable. I would be happy as long as it is not a double-digit growth in a year. Because when you have a double-digit growth, say 12 to 15% or 20%, it's too fast, too hot. It's not, and you are talking about within 5 to 7 years, if a double-digit growth is double the property. One of the biggest challenge is not about the property being growing, is the affordability of the next generation. Can they afford to buy? And when more of the younger generations are not able to afford, then the unhappiness creeps in and people tend to revolt. And they either give up or they don't want to be part of it. And my desire here is this: I think Vietnam has got a huge potential, good story. All we need here is this, the regulators to keep a keen eye that whatever that happens is sustainable. And to me, if property prices goes up by 5, 6, 7%, it's okay. When inflations are 3, 4% and property prices go up, and even if you take 5, 6, 7%, it takes 10 to 15 years for the property price to go double, and that's a sustainable model.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and good luck with your plan in Vietnam.
Thank you so much. Indeed, Khanh, really a pleasure.
Have a good time in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you.